We can now go across to France 24's Dave Keating standing by in Brussels. Dave, good afternoon. There were reports earlier that the EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and the bloc's top diplomat would be travelling to Kyiv this week to meet with the country's president. What's the latest on that?
Well, that has now been confirmed by the European Commission about an hour ago. They said that, yes, indeed, she will be going to Kyiv along with the High Representative for Foreign Affairs, Josep Borrell. But at first this morning, they weren't going to confirm it, and they're still not going to say exactly when she's going or how she'll get there. We first learned about this in a tweet from the Slovenian Prime Minister Janez Janša last night. He said that President Ursula von der Leyen would be traveling to Kyiv. He himself made that journey along with the Czech Prime Minister and the Polish Prime Minister last month. That visit was a bit controversial because the three leaders were saying they were speaking for the EU, even though they hadn't really coordinated that visit with other EU leaders and didn't have any EU mandate. There was also controversy because they announced their visit as they were crossing the border, while they still had to take that long train journey across the war zone in Ukraine, so there was concern for their safety. Since then, the situation has really changed. Kyiv isn't under direct attack. Of course, we know that the Russians are retreating and they're focusing back on the east. So I think the calculation now is that this is a time where it is safe for foreign diplomats to go. And it's also not a big headache for the Ukrainian authorities to have foreign leaders go there. Last week, the president of the European Parliament, Roberta Metsola, made a visit, and that passed well with no incidents. Now, what will they be talking about? They'll be talking about a number of issues, including the sanctions that are now on the table. Perhaps by the time of that visit, that fifth round of sanctions by the EU against Russia will have been agreed. But of course, President Zelensky is really pushing for energy to be included in those sanctions. I imagine that he will also want to bring up the prospects of Ukraine's eventual accession into the European Union. He wants some kind of indication that the leaders would eventually accept Ukraine as an EU member state. He wants that in a council conclusions document from all 27 national leaders. He hasn't gotten that yet. He did get something similar for NATO in 2008 when NATO said that Ukraine would eventually join NATO, although they didn't start the process for them to actually join. That was blocked by Germany and France. And over the weekend, President Zelensky had some harsh criticism for the leaders of Germany and France at that time, Angela Merkel and Nicolas Sarkozy, because in the end, it doesn't look like Ukraine will be joining NATO anytime soon.
He actually called on those two leaders to come to Bucha and visit the city, in fact. And I want to ask you, because right now we have a NATO meeting that's taking place, the first meeting to take place after what we've seen in Bucha. Who is attending this meeting, and what are we likely to see come out of it?
Yeah, who is attending is maybe the most interesting aspect of this NATO meeting of foreign affairs ministers taking place tomorrow and Thursday, because it will include, as has been the case for the last month, the European Union will be attending kind of as if it was a NATO member, and two EU member states that are not in NATO, Sweden and Finland, will be there. But in addition, there's more this time. The foreign ministers of Australia, New Zealand, Japan will all be there. And most interestingly, the foreign minister of Ukraine and Georgia. That is bound to not make Russia very happy, particularly as President Zelensky has already conceded that as part of the negotiations to end the Ukraine war, Ukraine can say that it will not join NATO. However, he said they'd still need security guarantees to maintain this neutrality concept that they're working on to end this war. And he said that would be individual countries, maybe let's say Britain and France. So it wouldn't be NATO guaranteeing that security, guaranteeing that neutrality, but it would be NATO members. So I think that NATO members, when the Ukrainian Foreign Affairs Minister speaks to them on Friday morning, they will be very keen to hear what Ukraine has in mind for those security guarantees and how it might involve NATO, even peripherally. Now, those non-NATO members are only participating in part of the summit just Friday morning. And of course, they are not NATO members. They're not participating as if they're NATO members. They are guests. But the lines are increasingly being blurred now between the West in general and NATO, and certainly between the EU and NATO.
Dave, thank you very much for that. Dave Keating reporting there for us from Brussels.